Remember austerity, when they said all we had to do was sack a few teachers, close a few libraries and tighten our belt and everything would be fine? Now have pensioners riding buses all day to stay warm and 1 in 10 parents using a food bank.
I went to bed and I felt lovely. And then about 2 o'clock in the morning I thought, I've left the heating on, so I've had to come all the way down on the stair lift to turn the heating off. And then you wake up freezing cold. And it's getting even worse now.
In one of the richest countries in the world. The cost of living crisis is nothing new, it is austerity on steroids. It is a political choice. Most people accessing a food bank are people who are in work. Most people having their wages subsidised are in low paid work and in precarious work. How does it feel as a working class person to queue up at a food bank? How does it feel to be in that queue? Everybody knowing that that means you've run out of food, not because of personal fault, individual failings, money mismanagement, but because of the capitalist system that we live within. 500,000 children being plunged into absolute poverty is the most damning indictment. Anyone with children knows the pressure and the anxiety around them being fed and feeling nourished and their bellies being full. The anguish that an individual person would feel when that food runs out. The system has created all of this tension, a failed system essentially where people run out of food. You have to queue up for food and then be grateful for what you get. And there is just such nonchalance to that suffering. You go through any community now, you will see queues of people at food banks, but it didn't used to be normal that people had to queue up for food because they'd ran out, and yet there is a political shrug. That is a price that's worth paying for their system. It's interesting how the richest people in society feel like they have any right or any knowledge or experience to pass comment on how some of the poorest people in our society should live, whether it's Andrew Bailey, the Governor of the Bank of England. He earns £575,000 a year, telling people on about £1,200 a month that they have to think about pay restraint. MPs, it is just so unbelievably painful to hear Government Minister George Eustice telling people to buy the basic brands. People are already doing that. People are already buying the basic products. People have cut back. People have cancelled subscriptions to Netflix and Disney or whatever it is that they tell us to do. It shows us that they know nothing of how people actually live.
68-year-old Michael, who's worked all his life on the London Underground and says he has £25 a week in spare cash.
I thought I was going to live comfortably. What I have to do is boil water every time I want to shave or have a proper wash.
The food bank can trigger a range of emotions.
Are you struggling? Too much.
None of the tension exists in Parliament. It all exists in our homes. It exists in our communities. The actual tension of people feeling tense about a letter coming from the DWP about being sanctioned, or a bailiff knocking at the door, or in relationships, people concealing the level of financial difficulty from one partner to another. Think about all of that stress and all of that tension. Simultaneous to that, there is a huge strain because of years and years of cuts to mental health services, the inability for people to often access the care that they need. A cost of living crisis leads to other kinds of crises, and actually you can't cheat your way and trick your way through this crisis. The cost of living crisis can only be tackled by looking at power and wealth and the redistribution of both. Unfortunately, you have a set of politicians now in the opposition who are scared of their own shadow. They're kind of running after this mythical, stereotypically constructed working class who, in my view, don't exist. Whose votes are they really trying to win when they won't talk about a wealth tax, or they are scared to talk about being in solidarity with working class people withdrawing their labour? A really concrete and tangible way that working class people are increasing their own pay. The Labour Party will never get that time back. In my view, it's a really dangerous political orthodoxy where you are opening up a huge vacuum, and that vacuum is going to be filled, and it's going to be filled quickly unless we, and I mean collectively, the left, the trade union, labour movement, get our act together to talk about the tangible and concrete alternative that is possible. There is no need to push an entire nation into a recession. There is no need to call for pay restraint. There is no need to restrict the civil liberties of working class people who want to organise for their own trade union freedoms and right to withdraw their labour. All of these things are ideologically driven to protect the status quo, to protect the wealthiest people in society. Then human beings are turned into the commodities within the system for the sake of the profits of the richest, for the sake of the status quo, and always about trying to quell any kind of resistance to that system, setting expectations. It's all about limiting our imagination, isn't it? These rich and powerful people who hold very important positions telling us what is possible, and actually it's a load of nonsense. The money is there right now to do whatever is necessary for working class people in this crisis. The NHS was born from the ashes of a world war where our towns and cities and communities had been ravaged by war, and yet that was possible.
Food, houses, clothing, employment, leisure and social security for all must come before the claims of the few. We have shown we can organise the resources of the country to win the war. We can do the same in peace.
So to say now, inside this crisis, that we have to set our expectations, that there has to be pay restraint, that the invasion of Ukraine will have an economic cost here, is all about telling a story to us to limit our imaginations about what is possible. It is possible that we have luxurious, beautiful community spaces where people can go swimming, play tennis. Everybody has access to all of the musical instruments that they could ever wish. Time and space to write if they want, or sing if they want, or act if they want. Watch performances in communal spaces. Nothing is out of limits for working class people if there was a will for that to exist. And it's up to us to demand all of that. What campaigners have been doing for the last decade is trying to explain how the cost of living crisis is a political crisis. So often that is concealed by the mainstream media. Double Down News are constantly trying to get closer to the truth, and we'd love it if you join Double Down News on Patreon.